I found out early on that the media wasn't reporting what was going on at the trial. I would go and see things, and then I'd read the newspaper the next day, and the things I read in the paper wouldn't necessarily be the things that I think they should be reporting on or were reporting on. It was really kind of strange. You know, I went to a hearing, I think it was in July of 2011. That was a hearing to determine whether Anthony Chambers, who by then was appointed standby attorney, remember Abdulmutallab fired his initial court-appointed attorneys pretty early on. Judge Edmonds then gave him a standby attorney, Anthony Chambers, who was just kind of a helper. Is basically what a standby attorney is. So this hearing was to decide if Anthony Chambers would have access to all the evidence in the case. And I listened to the prosecutors argue, and what they said was, we don't think Anthony Chambers should have the evidence in this case, but only Abdulmutallab. And the reason they gave was, if we give the evidence to Anthony Chambers, third parties can subpoena it and get the evidence to use it to sue us. Because Anthony Chambers doesn't have the attorney-client privilege, which would shield the giving of the evidence, but by any subpoena he would receive, because he's not an attorney on the case, but only a standby attorney. And I thought that was pretty telling. It raised red flags with me. Number one, why does Abdulmutallab not have a regular attorney? And number two, why is the government concerned about being sued in this case? What had they done to get sued? Maybe put Abdulmutallab on the plane with an intentionally defective bomb? I don't know, but I thought it was pretty telling. And Judge Edmonds decided, well, I'm only going to give the evidence to the defendant, Abdulmutallab, and then he'll have to decide what Chambers gets, if anything, from there. So the government won that hearing, and it was just kind of pretty telling, to me anyway. And that didn't get reported in the media as I thought it should either. No mention of the government being sued or anything like that. And another hearing I went to was, again, in I believe it was mid-2011 or so. And Anthony Chambers at this hearing requested that the trial be delayed. I think it was set for early October. So there was maybe 3 more months until the trial started. And what Anthony Chambers said was, remember, this is maybe 1.5 years after the incident. He said, look, I've just been dumped all this evidence that I consider the most important evidence in the entire case. And he went and listed it. I've just been given Abdulmutallab's passport. I've just been given the airport security video, security and audio video. I've just been given the composition of the bomb by the government's so-called experts, and he listed a couple other things too, something about DNA, which I didn't know what exactly he was talking about with that, but I thought it was pretty telling because several of the things he listed tie exactly into what I've been saying all along, that Abdulmutallab did not have a passport, that he was given a fake bomb, and that he was escorted on the plane without going through security, and that would all tie into that. And the reason I thought it was important was because the government withheld this evidence for almost 1.5 years, giving Chambers the least amount of time to look at it, the least amount of time to hire experts to testify for the defense and have them look at it, which is a common tactic of lawyers that want to play games in a case. You hide evidence and you give it at the last possible minute, because if you hide it entirely and don't give it to the other side, well, then that can change the outcome of the case entirely due to hidden evidence, but not if you give it at the last minute. So I thought that was pretty telling. And again, no report on the media about this or why it's important. So just another, another incident I saw in court that didn't really get reported. Now later on, as the trial was getting closer, I started going to the jury selection hearings. How this works is you put a potential juror on the witness stand, and each lawyer and the judge gets to ask a certain amount of questions. Well, the questions that were being asked were the same couple repeated over and over again. And Chambers would say, will you be able to tell the difference whether Abdulmutallab actually possessed a bomb or whether he actually had an explosive device, and different offshoots of that question. So I knew what Anthony Chambers' defense in the case was, that Abdulmutallab did not have a bomb that could have exploded. And Judge Edmonds, when she was asking her question, she kept asking this question over and over again. Do you realize that sometimes the media does not tell the truth? In questions like that. So, and it was pretty telling, knowing that Judge Edmonds knew, at least what I took from it, that she knew the difference in the truth as compared to what the media had been reporting, and that the media had actually been reporting a lie in the story. So I thought that was pretty telling. And there was a date set just a few days before the trial for final jury selection. As my trial was ending, I got a text from my brother indicating that I would be testifying in the underwear bomber case that he heard on the radio in Florida. And I was actually shocked, because even though I'd been talking to Anthony Chambers, who indicated if he was appointed full attorney on the case, he would call me, he was not full attorney on the case. He was still standby, and therefore Abdulmutallab himself had full decision over the witnesses in the case. So I immediately headed over to the courthouse to see if I could find out what's going on, and I ran into Anthony Chambers outside the courthouse, different courthouse than the one I was at, but only about 3 or 4 blocks away. I ran into Anthony Chambers outside, and he said earlier that day that Judge Edmonds asked Abdulmutallab who he'd be calling as a witness, and he said the only witness he would be calling would be Attorney Haskell, me. So again, I was quite shocked at that. I really wasn't expecting him to call me as a witness. The trial was then set for just a few days later. I think this happened on a Thursday, and the trial was set for the next Tuesday, I believe. And Lori and I were planning on attending every day of the trial, and we went down there on the first day of the trial. And the very first matter that was taken up was the prosecutor's request to kick both of us out of the courtroom for the entire trial, which I thought was pretty interesting. It was a motion to remove Kurt and Lori Haskell from the court, or something. It was titled something like that. And the prosecutors indicated that I shouldn't be able to see all the witnesses before I testify. I was set to testify at the end of the case after the prosecution put their case on, so I wouldn't be testifying for about a month, is what they estimated. And Lori wasn't actually listed as a witness at all. So they argued their case, and Anthony Chambers said, he didn't care if we were kicked out or not, so he had no response. But interestingly enough, Judge Edmonds said, I'm not kicking Lori Haskell out. She's not listed as a witness. I only have one requirement, and that is that she cannot talk to her husband, Kurt, about anything that goes on in this trial until it's concluded, which, again, was going to last over a month. So would have made for some very interesting times in our household. But very early on the next day, the case was settled with Abdulmutallab pleading guilty to charges that require a mandatory life sentence, which nobody ever pleads to a mandatory life sentence. Not only that, he made this long, pre-prepared speech that sounded like it came straight from the Pentagon, if you ask me. It used language and words that I don't even think he knows what they mean. It wasn't language that I'd been accustomed to hearing from Abdulmutallab during the case, and I thought it was part, at least to me, I think there's some sort of plea deal going on that we don't know about that required Abdulmutallab to give this speech, plead guilty to all the charges, and and it's in order for some sort of promise that we don't know about, and nobody knows what that is. But you just don't plead guilty to a mandatory life sentence. Further, I've known for quite some time that Abdulmutallab was offered some very lenient plea deals. I was told this by Anthony Chambers, and he turned them all down. So then I have the question of, why would you turn down a lenient plea deal is to plead guilty to charges that require a mandatory life sentence. And I would really like an answer to that question.